Welcome to CBC Windsor News at 6. I'm Meg Roberts. Thanks so much for spending part of your evening with us tonight. A cyber criminal group has claimed responsibility for the ransomware attack that's impacting 5 hospitals in southwestern Ontario. We tell you more on that tonight. Plus, the Veltman trial in Windsor has reconvened. We get an update on the man charged with killing members of a Muslim family in London in 2021. And a Windsor woman has made history after being invited to Rome for the Synod of Bishops. It's the first time women and lay members have gone as voting participants. Windsor's police chief says how they respond to mental health and addictions calls is not sustainable. He told the Police Service Board that officers are not experts on that subject matter. The board is asking upper levels of government to spend more money on programs that help people dealing with mental health and addictions issues.
These issues have been identified as health issues. They are. So whether it's mental health issues or addiction issues, they're strictly in the bailiwick of the health providers. What I'm saying is you've got the data now in terms of what our service is responding to, and we're saying we need help. We need sustainable funding if you want us to continue doing this. And we really aren't even, we don't have the skill set to be able to make these issues better.
Chief Jason Belair told the board about programs that have helped, like the joint nurse police teams and police partnering with Family Service Windsor Essex to offer more specialized care with the community's homeless population. He told the board that police act as the lead agency because it's who the public calls when they see mental health issues, but said other partners need to do more without naming any organizations. Board Chair and City Mayor Drew Dilkin says police don't have the support they need.
People have a perception of insecurity when they're walking around downtown and they see someone who's not performing a criminal act, but certainly acting in an odd way because of a mental health or addiction issue. They don't know who else to call, and so they call police because they want to get that person help, and police will always respond. But at the end of the day, it's not a criminal issue, so they're not taking that person to jail. There needs to be, and we've been advocating for quite some time about a drop-off place where police and EMS can take someone experiencing a mental health crisis and get support almost immediately and release the officers and the first responders to get back on the scene and respond to more calls. And so in some ways it feels like our advocacy isn't being heard, but I would say that that's probably the case across the province of Ontario and throughout the country. There's definitely a gap here. It's playing out and growing in its presence in each and every community, and we want to take action and try and do what we can to make sure that from a downtown perspective, from a community perspective, that our community feels safe anywhere they are in the city of Windsor.
The board saw a report that showed Ontario communities see mental health as a top risk factor for public safety. This is not the first time the police board has asked the federal and provincial governments for more mental health supports. They put forward the same ask at a meeting in June earlier this year. We asked the Federal Ministry of Health where that request stands. A spokesperson outlined how the Canadian government has given the province billions of dollars to spend across the healthcare sector. Ontario then decides what to do with that money. A spokesperson with the provincial government highlighted grants used for mobile crisis response teams. Windsor's team launched 2 years ago, and it's dispatched to about 1,000 calls a year. The province also highlighted the Safe Beds program that those teams can bring people to for mental health care. There are 4 beds in Windsor. Ontario's Ministry of Health also launched a mental health and addictions response team last year. It pairs paramedics with social workers to respond to 911 calls where someone is experiencing a low to moderate mental health crisis. Workers at Stellantis head to a ratification vote tomorrow. Unifor reached a tentative agreement with the company earlier this week.
Well, as long as everything is running, it is always good.
That worker is planning on voting yes on that contract, among other things. The contract includes wage increases, return of the cost of living allowance, and improvements to pensions. The ratification meeting begins at 9 tomorrow morning at Caesars Windsor. The vote beginning at 10. Windsor's business community says workers accepting the deal would come with some relief.
biggest employer in the region, one of the most important stakeholder in the region. Our economy significantly depends on what happens in the Windsor assembly plant. We want them back. We want them, to be producing. We want them to have the shifts running.
Windsor's unemployment rate jumped sharply last month. It went from 6% in September to 7.1% in October. That makes it the highest jobless rate among larger Canadian cities. Nationally, the rate climbed from 5.5% to 5.7%, even though 18,000 jobs were added to the economy. Increases in construction and recreation were offset by declines in the retail and manufacturing sectors. The collision in Lakeshore last week are having lasting impacts on our community. People in Windsor, Essex are rallying around a man who was critically injured in the crash. Last week, Mohammed Asif Khan was put in a coma. His truck and an SUV collided on County Road 42 west of Patillo Road. Khan had been in hospital now for 10 days. He's the sole financial support for his family.
He's helpful to everybody in a circle, in a friend circle, family circle. He's a pretty good guy, We are suffering right now because, it's pretty hard time for the kids too, because, the kids, they are 15, 13, 12, and 8 years old, his daughter. So it's a hard time for the family too.
In recent days, an online campaign has helped the family raise more than $43,000. The driver of the SUV in the collision, 20-year-old Sylvain Lessard, passed away last week. OPP say it's investigated the crash, but laid no charges. How a former Catholic Central School principal has made history in more ways than one. In what she calls a pivotal moment for the Roman Catholic Church, Linda Stout has just came back from Rome, where she was only one of 10 North Americans appointed to the General Assembly of the Synod of Bishops. It's a gathering of religious leaders at the Vatican. But for the first time in history, lay members and women have been invited too, receiving the same vote the bishops do. I met Stout today to chat about her experience and the direction in which the Catholic Church is going.
What do you think about that move to appoint lay people for the first time in history?
It made a difference. It was a brilliant move. And I think it really showed that the church was listening, that they definitely heard that lay people wanted a greater involvement. The lay people don't want the role of the clergy, but they do want to be involved.
Women's participation in all this, is this a long time coming? It is 2023.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that is going to take place in the next year is looking at the female diaconate. So there are permanent deacons and they study, and right now that is exclusively to men. So one of the questions that is going to come back for further study, what are the opportunities for women?
I'm wondering what issues on the agenda were most significant to you.
For me, it was that everybody really feels that they have a place in the church and a home in the church. And Pope Francis's message was really clear, like all are welcome. And what can we do to those individuals that are in those same-sex relationships, those that are divorced and remarried? What can we do in terms of patiently accompanying them so that they feel included?
Does this feel pivotal to you?
Absolutely. It is absolutely pivotal. Never before has this type of consultation taken place. I'm sort of calling it Vatican 2.0. It's going to be a new way of operating, and this will be the legacy of Pope Francis.
Speaking about the Pope, there's a really nice picture of you shaking hands with Pope Francis. What was going through your mind at that time?
Well, you're thinking, okay, what do you want to say to the Pope? The picture that was taken with him smiling was when I basically indicated and said thank you, and that, I am from Canada, and he smiled.
When two tornadoes touched down in the area last September, it bent the cross atop St. John's Anglican Church in Sandwich Town. Today, the cross was removed and inspected. Our video producer Mike Evans met with the repair team.
Today we're going to be removing the damaged cross on the top of the steeple. It's probably about 75, 80 feet.
What's going to happen to the original cross?
We're going to take a good look at it and see if it's salvageable. When we spoke with the parish, we mentioned that there's a good chance it's not salvageable.
So you got it down?
We got it down, yeah. 70 feet is high. What I can tell you is the base underneath that copper was probably original to the steeple. But this would not be original to the steeple due to the bolts. Those are hex head bolts. They started fabricating those 60 years ago. All that was holding it, like a good wind would have done her over. So you see the screws we have that are in there, only 2 of those screws were attached to the roof. We're going to suggest making a structural frame, perhaps aluminum, perhaps stainless steel, and then we clad that in copper. Copper usually lasts, in this element, 200 years.
The neighborhood just doesn't look the same now that the cross is down from the church.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, you're right, yeah.
A new documentary called 299 Queen Street West tells the story of much music through the eyes of their video jockeys, also known as VJs. The film will be closing out the Windsor International Film Festival this weekend. Windsor Morning host Nab Nanwa spoke with the film's director and a former Much Music VJ about the film.
What was it like for you to go down memory lane? Like, what were some of the feelings that went through your mind? You mentioned that you watched the documentary plenty of times by now, but when you were sitting there watching this for the first time and reliving some of those moments, what was that like for you?
I shed tears throughout that 2 hours watching it down in Austin.
I think because you had something else going on.
No,
it was related to the movie.
It's so nostalgic, and it brought me right back to those moments where I was actually living those moments, whether it was with the Backstreet Boys or NSYNC or Britney or Eminem or Jay-Z or whoever it was, but Sean
crazy names
has this way to bring us right back to that moment where it actually happened, and you don't forget those moments. So I knew it was going to be a tear fest for me, but I also learned a lot. I laughed out loud a lot, and you know, because I would watch Much Music religiously as a kid growing up. I watched it. That was my go-to as a teenager, like all of us in Canada growing up. So to see what Erica was up to, and Steve Anthony and Michael Williams and all of the greats that paved the way for VJs like myself to do our thing. It lasts 2 hours, but it feels like a half hour to me. It goes by so fast because you get so into every moment that Sean features in his documentary.
What do you think it was about Much Music that made it work so well?
Well, we didn't have these things around back then.
Yeah, that's a cellular phone, by the way. And it's a great point because, you know, watching through the modern lens, that was one of the most interesting parts for me, was seeing all these teenagers that are so transfixed in what's going on and so locked in, no cell phones. And really, it's lack of accessibility for the artists. That was the only place they could see them, their musical heroes, and hear them talk and get to speak about what made the music. Honestly, a lot of it was you guys. The fact that, you know, VJs, and that's the star of the film for a reason, you guys were just exactly what you saw is what you got. They were real, authentic human beings. And that created incredible television because it stripped away the hero-ness or, you know, the icon vibe and made them seem real.
I can relate to that too because back in the day when music video was new and novel, I was into the music videos. But as the VJs were stepping foot on live television, on Much Music, I wanted to know what the VJs were up to more than, you know, seeing the latest Duran Duran video or whatever it was. I couldn't wait sometimes for the video to come to an end to see what the VJs were up to. And we had these windows on John and on Queen Street that we opened up like daily, and people, fans of music, fans of the bands that were coming down, could come down and be a part of that life with us as we were living it. It was such a novel idea. It was so unique, and it worked back in the day.
Coming up, an update on the Nathaniel Veltman trial and your weekend weather forecast. Stay tuned.
cbc.ca.
A cyber criminal group has taken responsibility for the ransomware attack that continues to stall care at 5 hospitals in southwestern Ontario. The group alleges to an online blog that it has stolen millions of sensitive records, some of which are now online. The CBC's Jennifer LaGrassa reports.
At least a week before hospital systems in southwestern Ontario went dark, an unwanted intruder had already gained access, stealing data and planning its attack. Those are just some of the details that a cyber criminal group, which has upended care in this part of the province, has shared to an online blog, databreaches.net. A group called Dakeson told databreaches.net that it is responsible for the ransomware attack on hospitals. CBC News has verified the identity of databreaches.net's author. They go by the name Descent Doe, and CBC News has agreed to keep them anonymous to protect their safety. Descent says that they've only communicated with Dakeson through email. It's important to be skeptical of the claims that Dakeson makes to Descent. A cybersecurity expert tells us that they could be exaggerating information. They are a cybercriminal group, and they could be doing that so that they could put pressure on their victims. Dakeson tells Descent that it has taken 160 gigabytes of data that includes more than 5.6 million sensitive patient records. Some of that has already been published on the dark web. The group also alleges that hospital IT provider Transform had expensive software to detect intruders, but that similar passwords across administrator accounts made them vulnerable. They also say that Transform knew about the ransom amount on the second day of the attack, though Dakeson wouldn't say how much that was. A screenshot that Dakeson has sent to Descent shows a hospital negotiator for Blue Water Health and others saying to Dakeson, "We cannot pay. But please know this, cancer treatments are being canceled. Surgeries are being postponed. Our patients are hurting. And then we will recover. Delete the data and leave us alone." And in response, Dakeson says, "We're not upset. We'll pour your data into our leak site after the timer expires."
A lot of the black hats that I interview have no sympathy. They'll say it's just business, and they're not really feeling badly for patients whose data are stolen or exposed, or patients whose appointments have to be rescheduled.
One expert tells us that the hospitals made the right decision in not paying the ransom.
Ransomware attacks happen for one reason and one reason only, and that is that they are profitable. If other organisations took the same stance as the hospital and refused to pay, there'd be no more ransomware.
For the first time, Windsor Regional Hospital CEO David Mouget addressed this situation in a board meeting last night. He applauded staff for their efforts, but said that recovery will take weeks. Transform did not respond for a comment. Jennifer LaGrassa, CBC News, Windsor.
The trial of Nathaniel Veltman continued in a Windsor courtroom today, with questions around the possible effects of magic mushrooms being questioned in court. Veltman is facing charges of first-degree murder and circumstances of terrorism for the death of 4 members of a Muslim family in June of 2021. Catherine Brulot is following this trial, and she joins us in Toronto tonight. Catherine, can you tell us how the state of mind of the accused is the central point in this trial?
A lot of the facts in this case have been agreed upon between Crown and defense. You will remember that Nathaniel Veltman himself, when he testifies, admitted to have hit the Afzal family at the wheel of his black pickup truck. Well, for days now, it's been the testimony of a psychiatrist, Dr. Julian Goger, who has been that has been going on. And today, the Crown was cross-examining the witness. He had been speaking about a long list of conditions that the accused may have suffered with, including, for example, anxiety, depression, but also obsessive compulsive disorder known as OCD, and the after effects or withdrawal effects, they've also been called, of mushrooms. Well, the Crown in this case now says that this evaluation by the psychiatrist was initially done to discover if he fit the criteria to try and present a defense that is well known as an NCR, or non-criminally responsible defense. Well, the evaluation stated that he was not meeting all of those criteria, but the assessment also revealed that he was not meeting all the criteria for a diagnosis of OCD. And the Crown also questioned the fact that there hasn't been thus far a scientific study specifically on the withdrawal or after effects of using mushroom for people suffering for similar conditions as the accused.
Catherine, this trial is already longer than initially anticipated. Why is that?
Well, we had been talking about an 8-week trial. We have already passed this deadline. And it is normal in a court case to have discussions between lawyers and judges to happen without the jury present. All of those conversations are submitted to a publication ban until the end of the trial. But what we know is that some of those discussions have lasted for days, kept the jury out of the courtroom for days. And now the trial will continue on Monday afternoon.
Well, thanks so much for that, Catherine. That's the CBC's Catherine Brulot reporting live. Colette, that time of year again where the clocks fall back in time. And I know daylight savings has kind of got controversial with some people wanting to get rid of it. And I found out today half of all countries in the world who have observed daylight savings in the past no longer do.
And I'm someone who I don't think we need it. I am someone who thinks we can let it go too, but I don't mind it in the fall. I just hate it more in the spring. Right?
It is kind of jarring, isn't it?
Yeah, if we could just get the kids, if your kids would just stay in a little longer in the morning on Sunday and you could actually enjoy an extra hour of sleep. I wish you all luck at home. Just showing you what happens though with our sunset. So for today, well, it's essentially, setting now, but then because of the change with clocks, in another week it's 5:15, and then from there it backs off on us again in terms of what we're seeing as we're still headed towards winter, right, and our days getting shorter. So those daytime highs today, Toronto, actually the warm spot not only in Ontario but in Canada, 13 degrees, so that's all right. We'll enjoy that as well, especially since we're still generally sitting at that number. But really strong wind gusts, we know that. And some of these gusts earlier were really significant, over 60 kilometers an hour for Point Pelee. And the strongest stuff is now well off towards the east, or not well off, but moving off to the east. It's really along this frontal boundary. So we do get into some showery situations here too, but really light, and not all of it's even reaching the ground. So keep that in mind. It may look like something, but a couple of millimeters is essentially all that we're going to be dealing with out of this, and most of that overnight tonight into early tomorrow morning. Then the clouds hang in there and maybe some sunny breaks starting to develop for us then later tomorrow afternoon. Then as a ridge builds in, we should get a nice mix of sun and clouds Sunday before the cloud deck thickens up once again. Your overnight temperatures are still very mild because that cold front won't have completely cleared us. Up to 12 for tomorrow. Then on Sunday, looking like actually a very nice day, 13, but we do have wet weather coming back for the beginning of the week.
Well, thanks so much for that, Colette.
You're welcome.
Stay tuned. We got more for you coming up. New York's Bronx Zoo is showing off 2 snow leopard cubs. Mom is nearby to make sure the pair are well groomed and looking their fluffy best. Snow leopards live in the high altitude regions of Central Asia. In the wild, the white fur and gray spots make them nearly invisible among the snow and rocks. Those top predators are under threat in their natural habitat because of poaching and climate change. Well, that's it for CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, you can go to our website at cbc.ca/Windsor. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you have a great weekend.